Welcome to the Beltway Broadcast, the premier podcast for the workplace learning and talent development professionals of the Association for Talent Development's Metro DC chapter. We've got some great resources in store for you today.
Hello, fellow ATDers. I'm Stephanie Hubka, and I am the 2023 Vice President of Membership and Outreach and a member of the Pod Squad here at the Metro DC chapter of ATD.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Eanes, the Vice President of Marketing and Communications.
And we also have Halyna Hodges, our Vice President of Finance and Operations, as our producer. And for this episode, we are so excited to be interviewing Michael Brenner. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Well, I'm thrilled.
Thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled you're here. And I'm especially thrilled because we're going to be chatting about a topic that I don't think we have talked about in the history of our podcast. I think this is a new one for absolutely all of us. But before we get into our conversation for today, I would love it if you would take a few moments and tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. So I'm the founder and CEO of a firm called Chord Leadership. We're a leadership and team development organization located outside of Philadelphia. I work with leaders, supervisors, managers, teams, organizations of all sizes and stripes to really improve relationships, enhance productivity, collaboration. I help people with interpersonal communication skills. I talk a lot about emotional intelligence, conflict management, really how to create harmonious, high-performance organizations and teams.
I love that.
And I've been doing that for a long time, almost 23 years.
My goodness.
So around the turn of the millennium is when I pivoted into this line of work.
It's an incredible line of work to be in. I mean, it's the reason why, a lot of us find ourselves in this field and in this profession. So we're excited to learn from you today because we're talking about using music to enhance training. Music is something that I think all of us probably sit up a little bit when we hear that, because most of us have a pretty good connection to music. We've got favorite songs. There are songs that we think of that really kind of transport us back to a great moment or a particular memory. And I think before we get into the training connection to music, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about why music works. What is it about music that really kind of draws us in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've been playing music since I was a kid. I was introduced to music at a very young age, mostly classical repertoire, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, Tchaikovsky, by my paternal grandfather, who was very much into classical music. But then I learned clarinet. That was my first instrument, and I got pretty good at clarinet. I was playing conventional, middle school and high school band and orchestra repertoire until I was introduced to jazz. I guess I was in the 7th grade. And that was way outside of my paradigm as far as music that I'd been exposed to. And that just changed everything for me. So, to get back to your question, Stephanie, what is it about music? It's a cliche, but it truly is the universal language. Yeah. I can go to any continent, any place on earth. The folks there will be playing music. I don't necessarily have to know their verbal language. We can all connect over music, and music just just connects to the soul. I think it connects beyond just a purely intellectual level and taps into something that is just very, very profound and rich, about the human experience. And so for me, like music, I say all my heroes are musicians. I've said that for a long time.
Aww.
They're not athletes, not actors, not celebrities, like musicians, and I really, not only their musical output, but the way a lot of them approach life, which we can probably get into in this podcast.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh.
Now, I'm used to, music, right? In the training industry, I'm used to, or speak, giving a speech. I'm used to, using training to pump people up or set the emotion that you want before you get started in a training.
Sure.
But it sounds like there's so much more that we could be using it for. Can you go into other ways we can use this?
Yeah. So I had reached a pivotal point in my career in 2005 2015, where I felt like I really needed to home in on a brand, on an identity for the work that I was doing, not just Mike Brenner consultant. And I had a mentor, still a friend of mine, ask me, well, what makes you different from all the other leadership consultants out there in the market? And my initial answer to him was, I don't know. To which he responded, not really a good answer, Mike. I really want you to, I really want you to drill down on what is it that makes you unique. And I started to talk about my love, my passion for music, particularly, jazz music. And I suppose as I was talking, I was being very enthusiastic and passionate about it. And he stopped me. True story. He stopped me and said, you can't see your face right now, but I think you landed on the answer to your question. If you found a way to marry your background and expertise and your academic background, in leadership development, human resource development, and training, and marry that with your obvious love and passion and experience as a musician, I think you'll have something really special. And so that's what I did. So beyond, just kind of playing music at breaks and as people are walking in, I try to craft a brand that has music right at the heart of it. And so I called it Right Chord Leadership, from the saying to strike the right chord. In a non-musical context, to strike the right chord means to connect, at a very profound level. You connected with somebody in an organizational context. But of course, strike the right chord in a musical context means that as a performer, you were able to reach your audience and move them in some impactful way. So I started to see the similarities and commonalities between the world of organizations and the world of music. And then I just went for it. So at that point,
what are some maybe techniques or takeaways that instructional designers or trainers can use today for incorporating music?
Like short of building their entire brand around it?
Yeah. Well, like I've got a training on Monday. How can I better use music?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the low-hanging fruit, obviously, Chris, is music really sets the tone. It creates a mood. And I'm always thinking about when people are coming into the session, what is the vibe, that I want to set in the room? I want to set in the room a feeling of optimism, of openness, of curiosity. So I'm not going to play like Mozart's Requiem. That's just like, it's too sad, it's too morose. So I'll try to find music, sometimes vocal music, sometimes non-vocal music that I think sets the tone. Because we respond intuitively and instinctively to music. If you ever walk into a store at the mall that's just like blasting top 40, I don't know about you, but I'm just like, it's an immediate visceral response. In that context, a negative visceral response, at least for me. I want to drive a positive visceral response. I don't even want to necessarily have people be conscious of the transition that's taking place within them. I want to let the music kind of do the heavy lifting. Same with breaks. And then I always let people, when people are leaving the session, whether it's a half day or full day, I'll put on something uplifting and something inspirational to send people out on a positive note. So that's really the low hanging fruit. Other than that, if you're not a musician, it might be more challenging to build music into your training repertoire. Not impossible, but it does help to have, kind of a basic background in, maybe in theory and some familiarity with instruments. For me, because I rely so much on the jazz band as a metaphor for organizational or teamwork, it's helpful for me to have played for decades, in jazz bands and talk about the fluidity of leadership and stepping into the spotlight and then knowing when to step back and let somebody else take a turn, or not knowing exactly what someone's going to play because it's a largely, improvisational art form, and being okay with the ambiguity of that process. So these are a little bit more sophisticated, but it's all out there for people to use as they see fit. So those are some of the ways that I think about and utilize music.
I love what you've shared too, because to be honest with you, a lot of times when I've used music or when I've attended trainings that have used music, I felt as though it's been kind of offered more or less to fill silence. And what I'm hearing you talk about is something that's a lot more intentional than that. It's about creating environment, mood, bringing people in, inviting them to be part of a training space. And it kind of gets me thinking about another aspect too. And the reason I think I'm going to be especially curious about the next question I'm going to ask you is because I do a lot of storytelling in my training. That tends to be my background. So I know there are a lot of ways that you can use music when you are, say, giving people work to do, or during breaks or as they're entering or leaving a room. Have you or have you seen anyone use music as part of a facilitation style, meaning they're telling a story or they're providing information and music is a part of that experience too?
Well, I can offer you an example,
I love
Stephanie, and
that.
see if this resonates for you.
That.
So when I do a unit about active listening, and how listening is not hearing and hearing is not listening, listening is for me, an intentional act beyond just the airwaves entering the eardrum and being processed by your brain. I mean, that's hearing, but listening is a more intentional, purposeful behavior.
Yeah.
And so what I often do is I'll play a piece of music that I would imagine be unfamiliar to people and ask them to come up with a title for it.
Ooh.
So we will sit in silence and listen to this piece of music, usually without words, for 2 to 3 minutes, and then have people sort of lean into that experience and come up with, okay, if you had to title this song or this piece of music, what would it be? And I get some absolutely beautiful titles, A Walk in the Snow at Midnight, or Loneliness, or, they're so evocative and they're so poetic. And then the point of the exercise is, where did you have to go within you to come up with that title? What was the process? You had to shut out all this stuff and really lean into the music and let it sort of wash over you and connect to those feelings that emerged in you. And a lot of times we're in the habit of suppressing those feelings because, at work, we're not supposed to have feelings. So this is an exercise that really encourages and compels you to get to that place where you can connect an emotional state with a piece of music. And then the learning from that is, how often do we get that deep in our listening, presumably with another person? What did that require of us? What did we have to do differently to get to that profoundly deep place of deep listening that the exercise challenged you to do? Yeah. And so that starts a conversation about how most of the listening we do is very surface. We're waiting for the other person to stop talking so we can jump in, with our opinion or our narrative. And so I really lean heavily on the other piece of that, the listening, the being open and receptive to the story, to use your word, the narrative, the story that the other person is sharing. So that's how I specifically use music for that exercise. And of course, that ties in beautifully to that whole jazz thing, because being in a jazz band is about nothing if not listening deeply to what's going on around you and responding appropriately and thoughtfully.
That's right.
So it all kind of ties together.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah, it's cool. You should try it sometime. Just shut down the jibber jabber in your head and really let, don't be afraid of whatever's pouring over you. It's funny because some people say Unbridled Joy would be one title. And then somebody else would say Dark Depression or, they're just polar opposites.
Whatever you hear.
But that's the point.
Yeah.
Right. And we talk about that, why the difference? And so we talk about interpretation and, miscommunication and how even simple messaging can get misinterpreted or miscommunicated. There's a lot to unpack there, but it really starts with that foray into that musical space. So to make a long story a little less long, music for me, it's the ultimate gateway to so many things that I want to explore in my training, because it taps into that piece of us that is, I think, makes us uniquely human, but also a piece of us that rarely gets sees the light of day, like in a typical work day, right? We don't go there that often in the course of a typical day. So I want people to explore what that feels like, because it's kind of a rarity for a lot of people.
When you think about the number of people who listen to music as part of their workday, it's the background to whatever it is they're doing. They have favorite playlists, or I know, for example, my husband has a set work playlist that he listens to, and it is primarily instrumental, a lot of jazz in there that gets him into the mindset he's looking for. So it seems very natural to take what is, I think, as you described, very much a natural sort of, reaction that people have to music, to bring that, over into the training environment. It makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. I think many of us are accustomed to playing music, like you just mentioned, as part of our work. That's not something we're unfamiliar with.
That's right.
I listen to music all the time when I'm doing work.
Absolutely.
But for me, as a musician, and whose primary metaphor, if you will, is a musical one, I'm always looking for ways to take that deeper, further, more purposeful as part of my approach to training.
Yeah.
And really use music as a tool.
Yep.
For tapping into the kinds of things that I, as a trainer, feel, where we need to go.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of that, I know there's concerns. People are worried about like copyright violations or all that kind of stuff. So could you speak a little bit to the legal ramifications of using music?
Yeah, I'm not an attorney,
right,
Chris, but I've obviously done some research about exactly what you're talking about. I mean, between the three of us, the four walls, and everybody else listening, might there be some kind of issue with using, a copyrighted piece of music? I suppose so, but I'm not using it in a way that I think anybody would have an issue with. I'm really using it, and sometimes I do use, music that is out there that is free for trainers to use and stuff,
right.
But to be honest, I mean, if there's a particular piece of music that I want to use with intention because I want it to take us somewhere specific, I'm going to use that piece of music. I'd rather use something and ask for forgiveness afterwards than, you know what I mean, than not use it and not get the full power of the exercise or the activity. Yeah. So that's where I kind of stand. If any music record label attorneys want to reach out to me, we can have that conversation, but it hasn't happened yet in over 20 years because as a musician myself, let's be serious. I totally get, people wanting credit for the art that they produce. And I in no way want to exploit musicians, but I don't think I do in my work. I use it very intentionally and very specifically. And I'm not out there trying to say that a particular piece of music is mine or anything like that. So,
nice.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. So maybe for those listeners and viewers out there who are concerned, just simply Google copyright laws and using music in training, and I'm sure some recommendations will pop up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think anything before a certain time is totally allowed.
Yeah.
And
like
again, I don't mean to be correct.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to be cavalier about it. It is something. But to piggyback on what you said, Chris, if anyone has real concern about how to use music, I would encourage you to talk to your attorney or do some research, and there's a lot out there on it. So if you're somebody that really wants to get it right, there are resources to help you.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm also wondering too, I know for, the environments that you're creating in a training space, a lot of times music will be selected very intentionally. Have you, or would you recommend that in some cases people maybe crowdsource some of those selections? For example, asking people or pulling people in advance or giving them an opportunity to weigh in. Have you tried that? Or, are there ways that people can really encourage people to get involved in that perspective?
That's a fascinating question. I guess I do it the old-fashioned way by going, "What do y'all want to hear?"
Which I think works. I guess it works.
Right. It's like back in the day, that was crowdsourcing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Any requests?
Right.
That's
You're a DJ.
That's the old-fashioned exactly. Which sometimes I do. I've never kind of gone beyond that to explore how the collective mindset around what I should or should not be playing, would figure into the equation. That is kind of interesting. On the other hand, people seem to be, fairly content with whatever it is that I pick. So just as something for me to consider for the future, that's an interesting point that I've never really considered.
I'll be honest.
So it's interesting.
I'll be honest. As we've been chatting, I've been thinking about a training that I have that's upcoming. We haven't opened our registration yet. And I was thinking, in addition to asking people their names and their email addresses, maybe asking them for a favorite song. And of course, work appropriate songs are very different than other songs. But,
that's right.
Favorite work appropriate song.
That's right. Asking people if there's something they'd like to hear, you wonder if maybe they smile a little bit bigger when they hear it, or maybe those cameras come on, or you get that nice note in chat that says, "Wow, I love this song. I'm so glad you played it." I'm just thinking that could be a very interesting way to bring, even a different element of engagement in it, really helps people feel like they're part of something. So,
well, and what you just said reminded me, it reminded me of something that I do virtually every time I have a new group in a program, is I'll ask them the usual, name, position, number of years in position, and your first concert.
Oh,
so
that's a good one.
At that point, I've already introduced myself as, consultant, facilitator, trainer, coach, right? And also a professional musician. So I say, the reason I'm asking about the last, your first concert, to extend the musical theme that we've established here today. But beyond just asking the question, to piggyback on what you said, it's a super fun question to ask. And it also, I don't know it's kind of like asking, what would be, if we could play any song you wanted to, in the session, what would it be?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. It really lets people's guard down. It lets them know that this is going to be kind of a fun session. I've been doing this long enough that I can kind of riff on whatever the person says. If somebody says, Tiffany or Britney Spears or something, or the Backstreet Boys, I can kind of, I can have fun with that answer. Sometimes people say like Frank Sinatra or Elvis or the Beatles. So I'm like, wow, that's super cool. And I have a quick exchange with that person. And you can just feel like any tension or anxiety in the room sort of like melting away just by talking about people's first concerts. And, so that's something like anybody can do. I mean, everyone has their own sort of questions that they ask people, but it works for me, as a musician for obvious reasons. It's thematically connected to me. But I've also found over the years that it's a super fun, anxiety reducing question that everybody laughs. I saw him, or I saw them, or I saw her. It builds community in the room.
Yeah.
And again, it's just a really effective musical type of question to ask.
Oh. I'm thinking we might need to add another question to our rapid fire.
Our rapid fire? I was just thinking that. Yeah.
People love to talk about their first. Yes. I've heard all kinds of
at least
stuff.
For today's episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really, I cannot believe how fast time has gone. But we are actually at that time. I know. So how about this? Before we start rapid fire, we'll do a very quick rapid fire with all of us on first concert. So Milli Vanilli and Vogue.
Ooh.
Oh, and I think Young MC was in there too.
Love Young MC.
There you go. Stephanie, how about you? And then we'll take Mike to rapid fire.
Are we going with first concert or
First
concert
concert.
we're proud of?
First concert.
Those
That
are two
is an
different
important
answers.
distinction.
All
First
right, I
concert.
was very, very little, but my mother took me to see Michael Bolton and Celine Dion. So there you go.
How can we be lovers if
Oh
we
my
can be
gosh!
friends?
Thank you.
Is-
I will say this was even before Celine Dion was speaking English. She was incredibly young. She was not a household name at that point in time. So
Okay,
Just
how about
French,
the
right?
first
Absolutely.
concert that you paid for yourself?
Ooh, that's a good one.
ooh, that one I'd have to think about for a second.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd be proud of that answer because it might be Nickelback.
Hey, there you go.
Well,
There you go. Okay.
you know what? I preach openness and
That's it.
receptivity to
That's it.
the story of the other person, and so I need to practice that and be okay with Nickelback.
There we go.
If that, in fact,
Okay, so Mike, you
Our
get
experience.
that's cool.
you get a
Yeah,
special.
no, I'm not gonna rain all over Nickelback.
There you go.
I will.
I think
There we
everybody was
go.
listening to Nickelback back then.
It was
and
college.
Creed,
It was
and,
college. What can I say?
It was college.
I wanted to fit
right,
in.
Right.
Okay, so Mike,
I totally get
you
it.
get 4 rapid fire questions today. So your
A first
first one
ever.
is
The
the
f-
first concert
the
that
fir-
you paid for going to yourself.
I think the first concert I paid for was the Sammy Hagar version
Ah.
of Van Halen.
Okay.
When he had just joined the band in 1986, and they were touring on that first
There we
album with
go.
Sammy Hagar at the Spectrum.
Okay.
Love Van Halen. I prefer the David Lee Roth years over the Sammy Hagar years, but it was still a cool concert,
Cool.
and to see Eddie Van Halen just doing his thing, live
There
was
you
really
go.
exciting. So
Awesome.
there you go.
Nice. Okay. What is one book everyone must read and why?
So I knew that question was coming, and I had to really think about it. I'll just give you like a really, straightforward answer. One of the books when I was first getting into this line of work 20 odd years ago that really had an impact on me was called The Fifth Discipline
Yes.
by Peter Senge,
Yes.
Yep.
Senge, which was my first exposure to what's called systems thinking, which is to start thinking in terms of the organization as a whole, as opposed to divisions and departments.
Absolutely.
And so it's the exploration of wholes versus just looking at parts of wholes.
Nice.
And the interconnections and the interrelationships within the organization, as opposed to like the siloing that is so much a part of the modern day organization.
Absolutely. Nice.
And there was a chapter in there that really, in fact, I printed it out. I won't read it, but it's called The 11 Laws of the Fifth Discipline. And it was like a series of almost mind puzzles. Like one of them is the cure can be worse than the disease. Cause and effect are not closely related in time and space. Behavior grows better before it grows worse. The harder you push, the harder the system pushes back.
Yeah.
So it really forced me to think about like the organic, ever evolving, fluid nature of organizations, and how sometimes our expectations about what we anticipate is supposed to happen, is not the case, and to be okay with that ambiguity.
Yeah.
So that was a long answer to your question, but I recommend that anybody check that book out. It'll blow your mind.
Awesome.
Second.
Okay. What is one tool you can't live without?
I don't know if it's a tool, but like my saxophone for sure.
Of course.
Right?
There you go.
My saxophone has been my companion since I was in 7th grade.
Nice.
And has seen a lot of some good stuff, some not so good
The
nights,
good, the bad, and the ugly.
and the ugly. But yeah, man, totally. That's
Awesome.
the tool that I need in my life.
I love it. Now, final rapid fire question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
I've gotten a lot of great advice, like the gentleman who told me I should marry the organizational change work with the music, right? He was the one that sort of brought that vision, clarified that vision for me. Yeah. But in expectation of this question, I actually printed out something that I try to live by. Oh. It's a quote from Wynton Marsalis, the famous jazz trumpeter. In fact, I have a book of his right here on my desk. And what he said, it's a very brief quote. He said, "The soulful thing about playing is you offer something to somebody. You don't know if they'll like it, but you offer it anyway. And I think that's such a nice metaphor for life. Like, there's no script. We're just all doing the best we can. And we're putting something out there. And you know what? Not everybody's going to connect to it.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to necessarily like it. And that's okay, because we had the courage to put it out there anyway. And it's true when you play, and it's true at work, and it's true in life. So I try to put things out there. I don't know how they'll do, but you got to lean into that space. Otherwise, the years go by and you go, I shoulda, I wish I had, I coulda. I don't want to live like that. So
I think that's some of my favorite advice that's been shared on this podcast.
Oh,
That's
wow.
fantastic. Really,
That's
it is.
awesome.
It's a wonderful way to wrap us up for today. I got to say, Mike, this has been an incredibly fun 30 minutes that we got to spend with you. You have given us a wealth of ideas and information, a lot of ways that we can get excited about bringing music into the experiences that we're creating. And I got to say, you also inspired me to go pick up one of the 2 instruments I have in my house. So you've given me something to do
Wonderful.
this weekend. So thank you so much. And
You never get too old to
You
go
don't.
back to your.
you don't.
Yep.
You never do at all. Thank you so much
Never
for
do.
joining us. We really appreciate that.
Thanks to both of you so much. This was a delight, a pleasure, a treat. I could keep naming synonyms for I had a great time. I hope that came through. This was wonderful. It was great to make your acquaintance, and I can't wait to see the finished product.
We were excited too. And of course, a huge thank you to everyone in our community for
Absolutely.
listening or for viewing with us today. And before you go, we have a message from our producer, Halyna Hodges.
Our chapter has so much to offer. Go to dcatt.org and choose our community to learn more about our communities of practice, ZCPTD study groups, and peer coaching opportunities.
Want to network with other chapter members? Join the Metro DC chapter of ATD members on LinkedIn today.